Hi everyone, I'm Fifi, your presenter for week 9. So, in week 9, we have two interesting topics that we're going to discuss. The first one is about the World Trade Organization, and the second one is about the Preferential Trade Agreement. In this video, I'm going to cover the first topic, the World Trade Organization, while the other topic will be covered by another presenter later this week. Okay, let's move on to the first slide of the video. Since the early days of the Silk Road to the creation of GATT, all the way to the birth of WTO, trade has played a critical role in promoting peace and stability among nations, as well as supporting the economic development. This video will try to provide a better understanding of one of the important institutions in the global trade, the World Trade Organization, with clear and simple explanation. Our topic will cover several agendas or subtopics from the overview of this video, the General Agreement on Tariff and Trade, the World Trade Organization, until the conclusion of what we talk about. So this is the overview of what you will learn and the objective of this video. The General Agreement on Tariff and Trade will be divided into three components. Before the GATT, which provides the timeline of early days and pre-World War II trade, the establishments of GATT, and the principles of GATT. So this is the timeline before the GATT. The first one is the 3rd century BC, when Han Dynasty used the military to maintain the Silk Road. Move on to the 30 BC, when Rome conquered Egypt to get a better supply of grain. 18th century, when BEIC drove British foreign policy towards South Asia. In mid-19th century, the trade dominated the thinking of the United States government. 1844, the United States signed the Treaty of Wangxia with China. 1853 until 1854, when Commodore Perry sailed to Japan to open new trade routes. And the last one is the 1941 Atlantic Charter was issued to set out goals post-World War II. The establishment of GATT, General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, is a legal agreement between 23 countries which aims to promote international trade by eliminating or reducing trade barriers such as quotas or tariffs. Okay, so in the years of GATT, from 1948 to 1994, the legal agreement provides the regulations which oversees and put the global trading system under control. So, the GATT was first discussed in the United Nations Conference as the consequences of the full materialization of International Trade Organization, or ITO. GATT brought 23 nations together under legal trade agreement that was signed on Geneva, October 13, 1947. On the beginning of year 1948, GATT took effect and remained in effect until the Marrakesh Agreement was signed by 123 nations on April 14, 1994, and the Uruguay Round, which provided the creation of the World Trade Organization, was commenced on January 1, 1995. Generally, GATT have 4 basic principles that include non-discrimination, general prohibition of quotas or quantitative restrictions on trade, binding, and fair trade. The principle of non-discrimination consists of two components, namely most favored nation or MFN and national treatment. Under the most favored nation, each member must grant treatment to all other members as favorable as it extends to any individual member country. Let's say, if Japan lowers a tariff on a certain product on Indonesia's exports, then Japan will need to lower its tariff on the export for like products from all other member countries. Therefore, most favored nations will bring benefits to developing countries from tariff reductions. In the case of certain preferential trade agreements and preferences granted to developing countries, exceptions to most favored nations are allowed. While most favored nations addresses border measures, national treatment addresses internal and domestic policies such as taxes. It specifies that foreign goods within a country should be treated no less than favorably than domestic goods with regard to tax policies and other regulations for like products. The second principle of general prohibition of quotas or quantitative restriction on trade reflects that in international market, price distortion such as tariffs are preferred than quantity distortion. The reduction in tariff levels have been based on the practice of binding, which is the third principle, as tariffs at agreed upon levels and often above applied levels. Once set, tariff bindings may not in general be increased in the future. In the interest of promoting fair trade and fair competition in the global trading system, GATT introduced a number of stipulations with regard to subsidies, countervailing duties, and anti-dumping duties. Created on January 1st, 1995, WTO is the successor to GATT, which improved in regard to the inherent institutional flaws of GATT. As an update of the original GATT, WTO covers trade in both goods and services, intellectual property, and dispute settlements. The objective of WTO is to ensure a smooth, seamless trade flows between nations in the world. The organization chart of the World Trade Organization represents the body structures which support the administrative aspects of the organization. While the chart shows the general structure of WTO, the table displays the composition as well as the function of each structure. So these are the components that embody the organization chart of the World Trading Organization. While the following table displays the components of the World Trading Organization with its compositions and function. In regard to WTO, the organization comes with important contributions for the society, which are summarized as follows. First, the WTO can cut living costs and raise living standards, settle disputes and register tensions, all the way to be effective without hitting the headlines. The section related to the trade in goods in Marrakesh Agreement contains the GATT 1994, an update of the original GATT, as well as the Agreement on Agriculture and the Agreement on Textile and Clothing. The supervision of trade in goods falls under the responsibility of the Council for Trade in Goods, which has several committees and working party. The following picture depicts the committees and working party the Council for Trade in Goods responsible for. The Agreement on Agriculture addresses three issues concerning international trade in agriculture goods: market access, domestic support, and export subsidies. In market access, it replaced a quota-based system with a system of bound tariffs and tariff reduction commitments. In domestic support, a distinction is made between non-trade distorting policies and trade distorting policies. While in export subsidies, its use has not been eliminated, rather it has been limited to specified situations. Meanwhile, the Agreement on Textiles and Clothing represents the reintegration of textile and clothing sector into the GATT WTO principles. The speed on which the trade in goods develops is relatively faster than the development of trade in goods at times, which composes more than 20% of the total global trade. The General Agreement on Trade in Services represents the first multilateral trade agreement related to services. The General Agreement on Trade in Services defines trade in services as occurring in one of four models: cross-border trade, movement of consumers, commercial presence or foreign direct investment, and movement of natural persons. Similar to the trade in goods, trade in services has a council to oversee all of the activities within the trade in services. This responsibility falls under the Council for Trade in Services. The next key aspect of WTO is intellectual property. So, intellectual property is the most contentious aspect in regard to the Marrakesh Agreement on the trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or TRIPS. Intellectual property refers to the creations of the mind, an asset in the form of rights conferred on a product of invention or creation by a country's legal system. Trade-related aspects of intellectual property rights, or TRIPS, was the product of the 1986 until 1994 Uruguay Round. TRIPS was negotiated during the Uruguay Round on 1986 until 1994, which introduced intellectual property rules into multilateral trading system and plays a pivotal role in facilitating trade in knowledge, creativity, resolving trade disputes over intellectual property, assuring WTO members the latitude to achieve their domestic objective. The agreement sets out obligations for members structured around 6 intellectual property categories: copyrights, which comply with the 1971 Berne Convention on Copyrights; trademarks, which are to be protected for a term no less than 7 years; geographical indications that oblige members to provide legal means to prevent a false use of geographical indication; industrial designs, which oblige members to protect independently created industrial designs that are new or original; patents, which are available for any inventions; and layout design of integrated circuits, which extends for at least 10 years. The original GATT was somewhat unclear about the resolution of disputes. Therefore, the Marrakesh Agreement included an understanding on rules and procedures governing the settlement of disputes. Dispute settlement provided by the WTO offers a unique contribution to the peace and stability of the global economy. The appellate body of WTO supervises dispute settlement. The procedures on dispute settlement according to the understanding on rules and procedures governing the settlement of disputes are as follows. The procedures of dispute settlement outlined in this left figure applies to all the aspects of the Marrakesh Agreement, which significantly improves the procedures of the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, or GATT. GATT reactivated a long-dormant working group on environmental measures and international trade in 1991. Later in 1995, EMIT was replaced by the Committee on Trade and the Environment with the advent of WTO. So this is in regard to the trade and environment of the WTO. Sustainable development and protection and preservation of the environment are part of the fundamental goals of WTO. The World Trade Organization adopts trade-related measures, aims to protect and preserve the environment through its objective of trade openness, rules and enforcement mechanism, working in different WTO bodies, and through the ongoing efforts under the Doha Development Agenda, which includes specific negotiations on trade and environment, and some tasks assigned to the regular Trade and Environment Committee. The attempt to launch a new round took place in the capital of Qatar, Doha, at WTO's fourth ministerial conference. This attempt was successful, although there are still disputes between developing and developed countries beneath the surface. The Doha Round, also known as the Doha Development Agenda, is the latest round of WTO and was commenced in November 2001. The objective of Doha Round is to achieve major reform of the international trading system through the lowering of trade barriers and introducing revised trade rulers. Meanwhile, the Doha Ministerial Declaration provides the mandate for the negotiations, including on agriculture, services, and on intellectual property topics. So the Doha Round covers 20 areas of trade, which fundamental objective is to improve the trading prospects of developing countries. The conclusion we can draw from this topic is that GATT and its successor, WTO, bring a major reform to the global trading system which help producers of goods and services, exporters and importers conduct their business and provide benefits for all. All the materials in this video are taken from the official website of the World Trade Organizations and Reinhart's An Introduction to International Economics, New Perspectives on the World Economy. That's all. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, you all. Bye-bye. See you when I see you. Bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.